I'm Rachel Baumberger with Eerdmans Publishing. I'm here with Jennifer Harvey. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Rachel. It's good to be here.
Can you tell me a little bit first about yourself?
I'm a professor of religion and ethics at Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. I am a parent. I have 2 young children. I was raised in the church and have a lifelong engagement with Christian communities. I'm ordained in the American Baptist churches, and I teach undergraduates.
Excellent. It's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Tell me about your new book.
So my new book is called Dear White Christians, for those still longing for racial reconciliation. And it's a book that's very near and dear to my heart because I've spent about 20 years working with, living with, struggling towards an understanding of why it is that we remain so alienated racially in the United States still all these decades after the Civil Rights Movement. And what it means for those of us who are white Christians to take that alienation and that brokenness seriously and want to be part of healing it and mending it. And so the book is about what it might mean for Christians generally, but white Christians in particular, to really consider what it would mean to repent and to repair, and to move into relationships and postures and ways of being that I think God calls us to around healing and reconciliation.
Now, in the book, you make a big point of, or you bring in very frequently this famous quote about 11 o'clock Sunday morning being the most segregated hour in America.
Yes.
Why? Tell me about that.
Yeah.
Why do we still have a problem?
Well, that quote's very important because those of us Christians, and not just white Christians, Christians of many different racial and ethnic groups, I think, often will claim and say that quote, which is a true reality, that our churches are very racially separated. And we say it as a lament. We're very sad that our churches seem to be racially divided. And because of that, that lament, we, especially white Christians, have spent significant amounts of time and energy and educative work since the Civil Rights Movement, trying to teach Christians about reconciliation.
Yes.
Reconciliation would be the antidote to 11 o'clock being the most segregated hour.
And reconciliation, it's a great word,
It's a great word.
concept.
And it's a call I think many Christians believe we have been given, right? The problem is we've 40 years after the Civil Rights Movement, 50 years, 60 years, we still don't see reconciliation, and I'm really convinced that's because we have misunderstood the work required. So when we worry first about racially divided churches and we seek reconciliation, we don't ask ourselves, why are we so separated? And the reason we're separated, I think, is that white Christians largely have failed still to repent and to repair our racial relationships. And that's why we're not reconciled. So I really try and show in a loving, constructive way in the book how if we actually stopped trying to work on reconciliation, not because I don't believe in that, but because it isn't working for very important reasons, that our energy towards repentance and repair might birth something new that is much more in line with what God wills for us as a church.
Yeah. So maybe we can't move forward together and let bygones be bygones when we still have unfinished business.
Exactly. We have much unfinished business, which, given the events of the fall in this country, I don't think anyone would well, I'm sure there are some that would argue that, but many Christians would, I think, be willing to say, yeah, we have real work to do. So what is the work? I think this book helps us talk about the work in some really different, potentially transformative ways.
Yeah. Now, in the book, you argue against the reconciliation paradigm and for a reparations paradigm.
Yes.
Now, you like to start a controversy because reconciliation, great word. Reparations, not such a great word for most people in this country. Why did you choose that particular term to describe the approach you feel is needed? And what do you convey with that?
That's a great question. Reparations is a very controversial word for many reasons. One of those reasons is when people hear it, they think we're talking about sending individuals a paycheck.
Right.
That is not what reparations is, either in my usage nor in the legal usage. Reparations basically means if something has been unjustly taken, the person or community that has that thing, that value, whatever it is obligated to give it back. That's a reparation. And to try and make it right.
Even if, say, the thing that was taken by your great-great-grandmother?
Yes. In legal terms, you're not responsible in a guilt way for what your grandmother took. But if you have it because she unjustly took it, you have to give it back.
Right.
If my grandmother stole a car and gave it to me, I'm not going to jail.
Yeah.
But I have to give the car back,
right?
And most of us wouldn't argue that. Of course it's not my car. So by using the phrase reparations, the reason I use that is because it's accurate. And I think it's not as simple as saying, no one would argue, even those who've been working on reparations in this country for a long time, that it's an easy, that we have an easy, clear way to think about what reparations would look like, right? Whether we're talking about, the issue I think about most often is the issue of the enslavement of people of African descent. If we're talking about reparations for slavery, we're a ways from knowing what a good repair, what an appropriate repair looks like, though many activists and lawyers and scholars have actually been working for some time to lay a case of what that could look like, to make right what has been taken and then over time accumulated in terms of unjust benefit and ongoing harm. So I chose that term because it's accurate, because it's concrete, and if someone who picks up this book does so because he or she is serious about wanting reconciliation, which I am very serious about reconciliation, I'm very convinced that repairing is the work. And so reparations make sense in that way. And now that might look many different, what reparations might look like might vary a lot. But that's why I chose the word.
Well, can you give us some small idea of what Christian churches wanting to engage in this work of reparation, what would that look like on a practical level?
Great question. So I think for many congregations, the first thing I would say to them practically is, this is a slow, one step at a time endeavor. And the first thing it would look like would be doing some inquiry into their own experience of race. So one of the things that happens in reconciliation attempts is we talk a lot, especially white Christians, about people of color. White people in the United States have a race, have a racial identity. It came from somewhere. It has impacted us deeply and thoroughly. And so one amazingly transformative, practical thing to do for a congregation is to start by thinking about that, reading about that, talking about that with each other. And some of us who are white might go, wow, how do you even do that? We don't, which shows us how much we don't think about white as a race. Once we do start doing that, a very soon thereafter, it becomes very easy to see some of the ways that being white in the United States has brought with it certain kinds of benefit, whether we wanted it or not, right? Many of us grieve this benefit, but benefit that has come at the cost of others, right? Studying the history of whiteness in the United States, we would learn, when in the 30s and 40s, the federal government knew that housing mortgages was the way to elevate folks out of poverty and build wealth, they designed loan programs that white Americans could access, right? Most African Americans could not access those programs. And our history is replete with those kinds of examples that have over time impacted our communities. So a second then pragmatic thing a church can do is, by having done good work thinking about their own racial identity, what that has meant, learning some of their history, depending where they are, is looking around in their community. The legacies of racial injustice or the histories of injustice in this country are everywhere. And I think for congregations to explore what locally that looks like, does that mean that in your city, some communities still don't have access to quality education? That's a legacy of slavery. That's a legacy of injustice. We could work to repair that, right? And not from a model that says, this is a charity, we're doing something nice for people who are struggling.
Yeah.
No.
Not a handout.
Not a handout, a repair. Where I say, oh, if my kids have access to these schools, they are in a relationship to children who have access to a very different kind of school, and so we owe them something, right? Yeah. That's the relationship, is at that material, concrete level. I hope that Christians in particular, though I think actually many folks who are not Christian would really resonate strongly with much that's in the book. But I really hope that Christians who genuinely want a interracial, diverse, multiracial faith, brother and sisterhood to be a reality, I want them to read this book. Because I believe there are many Christians who long for that and genuinely do so. And I think it's achievable.
Yeah.
I think we haven't been using the right tools. And so I want those folks to read this book, because I think this book is a very hopeful book.
Yeah.
I wrote it from a place of love.
Yeah.
And what I want them to get from the book is that we can do it. I think white Christians struggle to talk about race. And I work with lots of young people, and I watch white students be terrified when we're going to talk about race. And when we start doing it, and we work with some of the histories that are in the book and some of the questions that are in the book, I watch them kind of breathe this huge sigh of relief and realize not only can they talk about race, can they own our racial history, but it's liberating to do so. It feels good to feel like you can set things right.
Yeah.
Even if that's going to be a long-term, imperfect process. I mean, we'll never fully set things right in this country. But the work of doing it is very liberating. So I hope that that's what people get out of this book.
So they don't have to live with the deep ache of feeling like something's wrong and everything you're doing isn't working.
That's right. That's right. And, and we don't have a good racial conversation in this country, mostly because white Americans and even white Christians have resisted having that conversation. So much of what in the book is not new. Black Christians have been saying it for a very long time, and in the late 1960s said it very explicitly, said to white Christians in the late 1960s, the civil rights movement, as courageous, brilliant, incredible as it is, the vision of beloved community that it sort of put out there for Christians to embrace, it's not enough. Yeah. And then the late 1960s, Black Christians started saying that more and more. And white Christians in the late 1960s, that's when we really stopped allying with the civil rights movement, was when Black Christians started saying that. So the book really lifts up those voices. It's not my idea. It's voices that white Christians really stopped listening to in the late 1960s, who've been continuing to say, this is what needs to be done. It's actually... It's hard, but it's not that hard. It's not that hard because there's no secret about what's required. Black Christians have been telling white Christians for a very long time what's required. Yeah. What's hard is we have to decide we want to do it.
Yeah.
But wow, if we did, we could change so many communities. We could change this country. I really believe that.
Yeah. So a little bit of tough love in the book.
Yeah, tough love. Tough love. Towards myself too. I mean, it's I'm writing from a place as a white Christian myself who, this is a personal struggle. This is not about, this bad community over here or this good community. This is about, how do I make sense of this?
Yeah.
What legacy do I leave my children?
Now, how has your identity as one of these white Christians both been an obstacle to you in thinking about race, but also allowed you to have extra insight and to be a bridge?
Well, it's been an obstacle in the same way it's an obstacle for many white people. It's when you grow up in a society, even among very loving human beings who want to talk about what is good and what is right and what love looks like, but who never engage with you about your own position in that society, never explain to you why you start out in a multiracial classroom and you end up racially tracked, don't talk with you about that. That becomes an obstacle to then, if you come to a place in your life, as I did in my 20s, where I wanted to understand and be in meaningful, authentic, interracial community, I couldn't understand why it was so difficult, why it almost didn't exist. I didn't have a language for it. And I had amazing peers in some of the communities I've been part of in my 20s, men and women of color, who said to me, you know, good for you, Jen. We're really pleased that you believe in justice. You go for it, but what does it mean to you that you're white? How do you do that, Jen?
Yeah.
And that was and they were coming from a place of tough love.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, I have no idea. Yeah. So the obstacle has been that it took me a very long time to learn my history, to learn the language of race and racial identity, to understand how formative race is even for white people. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge obstacle, but it's one that I navigated very intentionally in my 20s and 30s. I'll be navigating it the rest of my life, but I learned early into that process that it was navigatable. Mm-hmm. The insight piece that I think I bring because of being white is that I do understand that white people oftentimes we're scared.
Yes.
We do feel guilty. And this is not a defense of those. I mean, if I can imagine if you're a person of color on the other side who is experiencing the violence of racism every day, it feels like, okay, why would I don't have time to sort of give attention to that, right? Yeah. And well and good. Communities of color shouldn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But so as a white person, being able to say to my fellow white brothers and sisters, look, I know you're scared. I know you feel guilty. I know that you don't want to say the wrong thing. I understand why you don't say the wrong thing, but guess what? There is an other side. There's a beyond here. Yeah. There is a point that we can arrive to if we work at it, where we don't have to live in this place. And I think because I'm white, I understand some of those chasms that we get caught in, and so I can talk about that with people. And that's something else that I think is very practical in the book. Yes. That a congregation who wants to have some of those conversations could read this book together and really have those conversations.
Well, this has been a wonderfully stimulating conversation.
Thank you. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise. Anyway, the book, again, is Dear White Christians, for those still longing for racial reconciliation. And if you are one of those still longing, highly recommend getting the book. Thanks so much.
Thanks.